Welcome back to Conversations with Educators. I'm your host, Jerome Ellison, and today I have a special and returning guest, Andrea Miller. Thank you, Andrea, for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
My pleasure. So this time around, we're going to talk about AI in schools because it's such a hot topic. But first, I just
hmm
want to get, some background on who you are. So what roles have you had in education?
So my first role in education, like many educators, is as a teacher. I was a high school teacher. I taught economics and ninth grade mathematics. Taught for 6 years, and then after those 6 years, I worked in nonprofit at Teach for America, and I was coaching about 30 teachers in between like the Atlanta public school system and DeKalb County school system here in Georgia. And then from that particular role, went into being an instructional coach in an Atlanta high school, South Atlanta High School, and that is where I am. And the areas where I do instructional coaching has changed over the years. So I've been the STEM and STEAM instructional coach since 2017. So all of my work since then has been in that particular space. And then now I've also expanded into STEM consulting and talent optimization for district school leaders and other organizations.
Thank you for sharing. That's great because
Yeah.
AI, STEAM, STEM, they're all very closely connected. I
hmm
want to play a quick game called Hopes, Fears, and Ideas around AI. Let me just see what you think.
Okay.
All right? So let's
Okay.
start with your hopes. What are some things or let's start with hopes and fears. What are some things you're hopeful about or fearful or concerned about in terms of implementation of AI in schools?
Yeah. I am hopeful. Well, I'm going to actually start with the concerns that I see
Okay.
and then go into the hopes. So I think that because AI is so new and how powerful, well, new to the general public because it's not as new as people think. But because it's that new to the general public, there's still a lot of people are kind of wary about it, particularly in education, particularly teachers, instructors. And what I fear could happen is people are so fearful of it that we don't find a way to not only use it in our instruction, but to help students learn how to best use it. And it's a fear of mine because while we're grappling with that in the K-12 space, the business world has already integrated it. Here's a job description, must be able to use AI, et cetera, because it's an efficiency thing. So my fear is that we're going to create more of a gap by being so fearful of this. And so my hope is that as we learn in the education space more about AI, that people will become more open to it and see it as a tool that can be used. Now, I think with any tool, it can be used or it can be abused. But that's anything. That's anything. And if people really think about it, we've gone through this before. Every time there's a new technology, there's wariness. So it's like calculators, they need to learn long division, right? They got to do it by hand. And it's like, then now, if you went to a school and they didn't have calculators, you'd be like, absolutely not. I'm not sending my kids there, right?
Mhm.
Computers in the classroom, iPads in the classroom. Every time, access to internet,
Mhm.
we go through these cycles of why? And then it's like, okay, this is necessary. So I think it's the natural order of things, but that's my hope is that people begin to learn about it, educate themselves about it, or we're going to create a gap.
Mm.
And the gap is going to be created with the kids who need it the most.
That's a great point. And I think to your point, like those examples that you gave, like whether it's a calculator, whether it's a computer, whether it's just access to internet, the slower, we are as educators with adapting that and using them as tools and allowing our kids to grapple with it and learn, then the
Mm-hmm.
further they are going to be behind. They're going to be playing catch up by the time we all agree that, all right, let's start using calculators. So let's start having internet access everywhere. The corporate world is going to be on something else. Quantum
Right.
computers, they move so fast that we're always so
Right.
slow to the party, which puts a lot of our kids behind the eight ball, which is this is a great point. And I hope that we can be proactive. And like you said, there are pros and cons, or there are, ways that people can abuse it, but it's important that we kind of work through it together in a safe way to roll it out for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you have any ideas on what can work with how we should roll it out in school systems or in education in a safe way?
Yeah, so I think the way I've described it to people who ask me about it is I look at it like a knife, right? So like if you take like a chef's knife or a butcher knife, you wouldn't put a butcher knife in the hands of a 3-year-old
Mhm.
because they don't have the maturity, they don't have the dexterity eating things at that point that require, a butcher knife. So you would never do that. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with the butcher knife. It just shouldn't be in the hands of a 3-year-old, right? They need to be eating foods that don't require that. And then as they get older, you may give them a butter knife, but you also pair that with things that are soft to cut because the butter knife can't cut everything. And then you have the little, mini steak knife. And then you go from there. And then when you're now cooking for yourself and you're much older and you're an adult, you can now use a butcher knife on things that butcher knives are needed for. So, what I think needs to happen in the K-12 space is we need to have conversations where we look at pedagogy, child development, and what's needed after K-12 and figure out, just like we have with other subjects, what are the ages and stages where different types of AI need to be introduced? When
Mhm.
is it best, right? So when kids are really young and they're just starting to develop their creativity and think for themselves, we don't want them to become dependent on something thinking for them. Because that's not what the AI is for. The AI is a tool to work with. So that may be the time where you don't go heavy on AI influences, and if you do introduce some type of AI, it's very light. And then as kids get older, we are able to articulate what types of AI and in what subject areas and in what ways is it appropriate so that we teach not only teachers, but the kids how to interact with it. And so the same way that we have digital citizenship, and we're teaching kids how to be safe online, we need to teach kids how to be safe with AI. But that's what I think will need to happen. I mean, that's not going to happen overnight, but that's how I like to think of it is there is an appropriateness and that a lot of that has to do with age and purpose and stage and reason.
Wow. I've never heard someone broke it down like that. I love that analogy of like going from even a plastic knife to a chef's knife. And even the idea of like how we roll out developmental standards in certain
Mhm.
content areas, like work backwards, right? Starting with what we need to be college and career ready, then working backwards developmentally so that students have a progression of what they need at each stage to be ready by the time they graduate 12th grade or get into college. So I
Right.
think that's an interesting, very interesting way to do it. My only thing is now, I think educators have to be involved in that conversation and that rollout. Sometimes it always comes top down, and it's like people who haven't really been on the ground with the kids and really know the kids developmentally. So if we get educators' voice in that process, then it will be even safer and a more effective rollout if we get everyone involved in that conversation.
Yeah, I think educators have to be part of the conversation. I think people who are experts in brain development and behavior need to be part of the conversation, and also industry, because that's where college, post secondary, and industry, because that's where students are going to go to. So I agree with you. I think a lot of times decisions are made in silos and the areas are not intersecting enough. But in order to do something like that, all of those areas really need to be together.
Yeah. And even I think another key thing would be like, how do we bridge? And I was reading an article on this not too long ago, is how do we bridge that gap between whether you 12th grade or college into the industry? Like we're creating
Yeah.
more internships and more opportunities to get our kids into these organizations so that they can now apply those skills and have an opportunity to get a career, have a career path directly after graduation. So I think there is a gap there.
Right. Right, right. And a lot of times when teachers are in school, they're very insulated. from how things are changing on the outside. And I see that in my world every day because part of my job is in the school building, when we talk about curriculum and instruction, professional development. But the other part of my job, particularly because I work at high schools, is outside the building and knowing what's changing. And a lot of times educators are so insulated with issues that in-house, they don't even realize that the way they applied for jobs, people aren't applying for those jobs. Or the way that you think this job functions completely different. You can take the world of journalism, and I have plenty of friends that are journalists, and journalism looks very different today than it did when we were in high school. Like everyone I know that does anything that is journalism or journalism adjacent, they have to be just as tech savvy. They have to be just as up on the game with different AIs that do different things because many of them are companies of one or companies of two, And so if you as a educator that's supposed to be guiding students to careers and trying to figure out what they need, but you don't realize how careers have changed and shifted, that's where those partnerships and that industry input to help people in the school buildings and in districts make sure that they're not out of touch.
Well said. Last question before we end the conversation is if you had some advice or feedback to give to policymakers or educators or parents or anyone around AI, what is the message you would like to send to them and why?
I would say on the heels of what we were saying about those groups not intersecting, be intentional about pushing yourself into another group. So like if you work in industry, you need to start going to schools and school districts and asking questions and wanting to learn more about how things work on that side so that you can be a participant, a good stakeholder, a participating stakeholder. If you work in K-12, you need to be going to Chamber of Commerce meetings. You need to be going to industry meetings within your state, within your town, within your city, and find out what's going on around you and invite people to come into your space so that people know that you want an open line of communication. If you're a parent, go to the school because it is your right to ask, hey, do you teach computer science? What are you doing with AI? Is there a plan to eventually introduce this? Because you have a right to ask and they have a duty to respond to you in some type of way. So I would just say for people to get out of their bubble and their space that they're in and find out about those other factors that impact this conversation.
Man, I just want to piggyback onto that point because that's so great. Is just that, and we all have a responsibility to do that. I think it affects us all, and it's up to our benefit as a country, as a world, to continue to get into the schools and support the future generation. That's going to only push the country and the world forward with these technologies. So if we have any expertise, if we have any, we all stakeholders. So we have to go into making sure our kids are prepared for the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So thank you again, Andrea, for coming on the show. I appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you guys for watching. Take care. Bye.